Somewhere under the hot sand of the Gobi Desert of Mongolia lurks a dangerous creature, one that is said to be able to spit acid venom and deliver high-voltage charges to their prey: the Mongolian Death Worm. The Mongolian death worm is described as a fat, red worm that can grow to somewhere between 60 or 150 centimeters. It first came to Western attention via the 1926 book On the Trail of Ancient Man by Roy Chapman Andrews. In the book, Andrews describes second-hand tales of a monster said to live in the Gobi Desert that he heard during a gathering of Mongolian officials. In the book, Andrews writes that he does not believe in the worm's existence himself, but he does note that stories of it circulated in Mongolia, and that it was supposedly so feared that the mere mention of its name is thought to attract bad luck. The Mongolian death worm is said to inhabit the western and/or southern part of the Gobi Desert. It is rarely seen on the surface as it prefers to remain hidden beneath the sands, but it is believed that the worm does emerge from underneath the sands after rain when the ground is still wet. Local folklore also says that the death worm likes the color yellow and has a preference for local parasitic plants such as the goyo. Merely touching the worm is said to cause instant death. Its venom is lethal to anything it hits, and supposedly it even corrodes metal. The death worm is also said to be able to attack from a distance by electrocuting its victims. Many have wandered into the Gobi Desert seeking the truth of this creature's existence, but they have all come back empty-handed. Czech cryptozoologist Ivan Makale traveled to Mongolia 3 times in order to search for the worm. In the years 1990, 1992, and then finally in 2004. Drawing inspiration from Frank Herbert's novel Dune, he constructed a motor-driven thumper and used small explosions to try to find the worm underneath the sand, but he was ultimately unsuccessful. But despite the lack of hard evidence for the worm's existence, many still believe that the legends and stories of the creature must have some basis in historical truth. That something had to have inspired the tales of the death worm in that desert, because the reports of its existence come from many different times and places and are very similar to each other. The Gobi Desert spans a territory of roughly 500,000 square miles of rough terrain, which makes it very likely that there might be an undiscovered animal species hiding somewhere under the desert sands. But no live or dead death worms have ever been found, which does make one wonder about its existence. The lack of predators and the hot desert winds of the Gobi Desert means that a carcass of an animal would most likely be preserved, but no dead death worm have ever been found. No one is really sure what the death worm actually is. it's theorized by some that the creature is a misidentified animal, as most agree that the Mongolian Death Worm isn't a worm at all because the Gobi Desert would be too hot for annelids to survive in. In 2005, an expedition from the Center of Fortean Zoology, led by journalist Richard Freeman, crossed 1,000 miles of the Gobi to hunt for the death worm. But, like many others, they came up empty-handed. From this, Freeman would conclude that the tales of the worm's powers had to be complete fiction, and that the reported sightings of the creature was likely that of an unknown species of worm lizard or amphisbaena. A worm lizard does resemble a large worm, and it does live underground and can grow to several feet in length. Another animal that has been proposed as the animal that inspired the legend is a sand boa. Sand boas spend much of their time basking below the surface of the sand. But unlike the legend, no known species of the sand boa snake and/or worm lizard can deliver lethal electric shocks. There are some venomous snakes, such as cobras or vipers, that can spit poison. And while that poison can cause harm, such as blindness, it's not acidic like in the legends of the death worm. The electrical abilities of the death worm are more difficult to explain. Animals using electricity isn't that unusual, as there are many animals that does use electricity for a variety of reasons. Some use electricity to help them locate prey, such as echidnas, platypus, and sharks, who are all able to pick up on electrical impulses given off by potential prey. But the death worm is said to use electricity as a weapon, and we do know of a few animals that also use electricity in that way. The stargazer fish can shock and immobilize its prey by using an electric current. The electric ray uses electricity to catch prey. But the most well-known fish with this ability has to be the electric eel. While there might not be many documented cases of an electric eel causing the death of a human, it has happened. The electric eel can generate an electrical charge up to 600 volts, though some sources claim that it can generate a charge as high as 860 volts, which is the strongest of any known animal. Both the death worm and the electric eel have a bit of a misleading name. The electric eel is actually more closely related to the catfish than the eel. Most of the animals that use electricity as a weapon are water-dwelling creatures, which is one of the reasons why the most common theory for the death worm is that of some kind of snake or legless lizard, and why it's also believed that the death worm's abilities to electrocute people is merely a work of fiction. The Mongolian death worm is an interesting creature in that while many believe that the creature is nothing but a legend, they also don't dismiss the idea that the creature could exist entirely. When I first heard of this cryptid, I assumed that it was a massive creature, similar to the ones you'd see in a movie like Dune. But it's not, it's actually snake-sized, with a misleading name, and the abilities that it has are also ones that do exist in animals that we know exist. It's not really that unbelievable that there would be a creature that is venomous and is able to spit venom, or has the ability to give people electric shocks. And we know that legless lizards and animals like that exist, so it has a lot of components that make it a believable creature. It is possible that the conclusion that Roy Chapman Andrews made in his 1926 book is the correct one. The Mongolian death worm is nothing but a legend. but many still believe that the creature could exist, but that the reported sightings of it are misidentified animals, such as snakes or lizards. The Gobi Desert is a vast area and more than capable of keeping secrets. Perhaps the death worm is one such secret, a new type of venomous snake that also has the ability to generate electric shocks that lives somewhere underneath the Gobi. Maybe one day we will learn if the Mongolian death worm is a legend, a misidentified snake or lizard, or a very real mythological monster that lives deep in the Gobi Desert.